Howdy folks, Jay Boone down here at Emerald City Guitars, and as promised, we're doing a little something different in addition to our pick of the day. And today, I'm here with Liz Herrin, because Liz takes apart most of our vintage guitars and authenticates them for us. We kind of do it as a team, but it's all focused around Liz's bench, and she actually takes these things apart. So Liz came to us with already a long history in the music business. I think she showed up here with about 15 years under her belt of music retail, so we got a really great veteran when Liz showed up, and she's proven to be just a huge asset to our shop, and we really appreciate you, Liz. So.
Appreciate you being here.
Thanks for doing this today. And today we have a really special guitar. This is an original 1958 Fender Stratocaster that we acquired from a very high-profile guitarist that I can't mention. But what's very unique about this guitar is it came stock with gold hardware, which around this time was usually something you'd only see on the Mary Kay series guitars that Fender was doing. But this is the real deal. So somebody custom ordered this with gold hardware, and here we are sitting in front of this thing. So without further ado, I'm gonna turn it over to Liz, and she's gonna walk you through this piece, and we really appreciate you tuning in. I hope you get a lot out of this.
I'm gonna go through and show you line by line each detail on the vintage guitar authentication checklist. So yeah, let's have at it. Obviously it's a Fender, it's a Stratocaster, which we all know that. Take out the trem arm. Makes things easier to access without all this extra hardware. Take off the bridge cover, and then get the strings loosened. Some of these old guitars, it's good to do this by hand versus using a string winder, just to play it safe. All right, now that I got the strings loosened up, we're gonna grab our wire cutters. And the strings should just pop right out. Usually I like to keep the strings tidy by tying them up in a knot before I chuck them in the garbage. All right, so the next step is gonna be to remove the neck from the body, and that involves taking out these 4 screws with the neck plate, which from this era, they etched the serial number into the neck plate, and so that's one way of finding out how to date the instrument, which we'll get into that in a little bit. Sometimes a good indicator when a guitar has never been touched or altered in any ways, when you pull the neck out of the pocket, if it gives some resistance and then eventually just makes a popping sound. So the first thing that I look at is the neck heel. In this case, they penciled in the date. So in this case, it was May of 1958, so 5-58. In this particular guitar, they dated the body in the back cavity. It's hard to see behind the claw, but it's dated 4/58, so April of 1958. Oftentimes they would pencil it in the front cavity, but in this case it's in the rear. So now that we know that the body has a date of April of 58 and the neck is May 58, that's a good indication that they were actually pieced together at the factory. It doesn't take one day to build a guitar. So now, next step, I'm gonna remove the screws from the pickguard and be able to pull that out so we can get a look under the hood. So one thing that I typically do as I unscrew the screws out of a guitar is I keep them in a little cup. So believe it or not, the original screws in a vintage guitar are actually quite valuable. In this case, it holds extra value because it's the gold hardware. So this might sound crazy, but this is one thing that we do, which is the smell test. So not only is it fun to do that, but it actually does serve a purpose. There's something to be said about the smell of the old electronics, just the old wood, old finish. All right, so now looking at the electronics and the pickups, it's a very, very neatly done job. So one of the big things that we look at when we date a guitar is we read the potentiometer codes, or otherwise known as pot codes for short. Basically has a 6 or 7 digit number. Usually the first 3 digits are the manufacturer of the potentiometers. In this case, 304, so that company was Stackpole. So the date codes on these are actually the 23rd week of 1957. So these pots were actually made in 1957. Basically the code, it reads 304-7 2-3. So the 7 would indicate that it's a 1957. 2-3, 23rd week of 1957. Original masking tape, bundling the wires together, very tidy and as far as the wires are arranged. Original solder joints, the pots are all original. Phone book capacitor, yeah, just super clean. So given that the potentiometers are from 1957, but everything else is dated for 58, we're always gonna wanna call it a 1958. Okay, so let's talk about the finish process of how they went about it back at this time. They would generally do the top first and the back second when they would spray on the finish. So in that process, what they would do after they sprayed the top, they would nail in these nails in these strategic places. So when they went to flip the body over to spray the back, the top would be suspended off the surface. And one way to tell that this is indeed the original finish is if you look inside all of the holes, including the little nail holes, there's no finish inside there, it's just bare wood. And one way to tell if it was a refin or refinished, you would actually see paint down inside the holes. So these are nice and bare wood and bone stock. Next thing down the list is the pick guard. One way to know that I could tell that this is the original pick guard, first of all, from this era, it was just a single ply, simple 8-hole white pick guard. This is a big indicator. You can see and feel how some of the finish has actually come off of the guitar and stuck to the pick guard. You can even feel it at the surface of the body of the guitar. All right, so now I'm gonna talk about the neck and all the appointments on the neck. First of all, the tuning machines. These are error correct, Clouson single line, gold-plated tuning machines. Got the proper patent number on the underside. That's an indication that it's error correct. They also would do a couple nail holes on the back of the neck. Same process as when they finish the body. What they would do is they would actually spray the back of the neck first, then insert the nails, flip it so it's suspended, and then they would lacquer over the top of the neck. And one way to know that these frets are original, not only about how they're seated and fitted into the slots, it's a nice snug fitting, you could tell by looking. They also actually fretted the neck before they lacquered the top, so you can see evidence that the lacquer is kind of butted up against the edges of the frets. You can actually kind of feel it if you run your finger across the frets. The decal looks good. It's in the proper location, proper font. Yeah, looks so legit. One cool thing about this is the truss rod. Not only is the truss rod nut gold plated, but the actual entire truss rod is gold plated. The only way to really get in there and see is to take the nut out and get in there with a flashlight, and it's a little hard to pick up on camera, but trust me. Frets look good, nut looks good, nice and snug. So let's turn the lights off and check this thing out under the blacklight. So basically what we're looking for is a consistent hue of green throughout the finish of the instrument. The reason why is because if there's any imperfections within that in the blacklight, then that's an evidence that there may have been something altered with the finish, maybe repair, partial refin, or sometimes a complete refin. But this checks out to be pretty solid. So obviously we can't go through every single guitar make and model in one video, but hopefully you have a better understanding now of the process that we go through to authenticate, in this case, a vintage Fender Stratocaster. We do, however, plan to go through this process again in the future with other iconic makes and models, so keep checking in and we'll see you next time.